What's up, everyone? This is a quick video about how to get started with the nomadPi. If you don't know what the nomadPi is, please check out my other video where I made a quick walkthrough of all of its features. The only requirement for this video is a Raspberry Pi, either 4B or 5, with 4 or 8 gigabytes of RAM, where 8 gigabytes is obviously better. You also will need an internet connection, and ideally, you will be doing this from your laptop. Initial setup is a bit more involved than what you will need to do later to set up all your devices. And all of that will be described in different videos. So in order to get started, I will first have to flash the Raspberry Pi OS on some storage. In my case, I'm using today a SD card, but I highly recommend you use a SSD drive, which is going to be much faster and more reliable. For that, on my Mac, I'm using the Raspberry Pi Imager. I have to choose which Raspberry Pi version I'm flashing this on. In my case today, I'm using a Raspberry Pi 4 Model B. The operating system I want is not one of the three up top. I will have to go to Raspberry Pi OS Other and choose Raspberry Pi OS Lite 64-bit. And for storage, as I said, I have an SD card today. It's important now that you set some settings that will help you later connect to your Raspberry Pi and install the nomadPi onto it. So you want to set your host name to, in my case, nomadPi. You can choose something else. This will only define how you then connect to the Raspberry Pi once the OS is installed. You also want to set a username and password for accessing the Raspberry Pi itself. And you want to set the credentials to your internet connection. In my case, this is my router name and this is my password. Um, you also want to enable SSH under services. You want to use password authentication, and that should be pretty much it. So I'm going to save this and continue with the installation. The installation is complete. I can now try to connect to my Raspberry Pi. Bear in mind that the first time you boot the Raspberry Pi after you inserted your SD card into it, it's going to take a few minutes before it becomes reachable. Once that is the case, you can simply run ssh pi at whatever hostname you chose. In my case, as you remember, it's nomadpi.local. You will be asked to trust the certificate. You can say yes, and you will have to provide the password that you chose during setup. Right, so I'm now in the Raspberry Pi console, and all I have to do in order to install the nomadPi OS is to copy this one line from either www.nomadpi.com or the GitHub repository, which goes through these steps as well as through other details about how the platform works. So I will copy this one and paste it into my terminal and hit enter. As you can see, the system dependencies are being installed. This is going to take 10 to 15 minutes depending on whether you have an SD card or an SSD drive and on the speed of your internet connection. Okay, the installation is through, and as you can see, we're not done yet. The system had to reboot, and there's a few steps more before we can actually get started. So I have to SSH into my Raspberry Pi again. Again, it might take a few seconds before the system reboots, so if this doesn't happen immediately, just wait a little bit. Once I'm in my Raspberry Pi, I have to go into the installation directory of nomadPi and simply run start.sh. The first time you run this is going to pull all of the services that are needed for the system to work. It's again going to take a while, probably another 10 to 15 minutes, depending on your setup. Okay, even this step was successful. It took about 15 minutes on the Raspberry Pi 4 with my internet connection. So that's more or less the ballpark number you're looking at. You can see that I am provided with some URLs where parts of the service are now running. The most important one is certainly the front end. This is what you will be using to configure everything else, which we will do in separate videos. And this is basically what you will be interacting with most of the time. But since we're here, I will give you an overview of what the rest are. Portainer, this is getting a bit technical, is pretty much the Docker interface for the whole system. So you can see which services are running, what's their status. You can check logs, you can restart stuff. This is really something for the more advanced users. You normally wouldn't have to look into that. But if you want to have a peek into how the system works, that's probably the best place where to start. The core API and the automation API are Node-RED instances which uh, basically communicate with the whole hardware that stands behind the nomadPi, and implement the flows that support different functionalities, such as switching on and off relays, reading values from sensors, and so on and so forth. If you're familiar with IoT, you might already know Node-RED. Most likely, you would already know it. If not, there's plenty of tutorials online in case you want to customize the platform. Uh, this is a fairly approachable system with which to do it. And finally, Frigate is a camera surveillance system. It's AI powered, and it integrates many different types of cameras. This is something that you will need to set up if you want to use the security features of the nomadPi, which lets you set up some cameras and some triggers for an alarm that you might want to trigger when motion is detected, for example. But all of that will be discussed in more depth into separate videos. So for now, what I will do is I will just open the front end and show you around how uh, things will look like the first time you have installed nomadPi on your Raspberry Pi. And here we go. If you see this screen, it means that the nomadPi was successfully installed and things are in principle running already. Things will look fairly empty at this stage. You still need to set up all of your devices, appliances, sensors, and whatnot. If you want to see how the nomadPi looks once it's already set up, please check out the other video where I've made a walkthrough of the system and its features. And I will see you in the next one where we will start setting up some relays. Bye.